So I think SONOFF have finally fixed the biggest problem with their mmWave presence sensors. Because if you've ever used the original SONOFF SNZB-06P, you've probably had the same experience I did. It was incredibly sensitive, and often too sensitive. And in a small room like our ensuite bathroom, that becomes a bit of a problem. Even in our bedroom, it would detect movement through walls, through doors, sometimes from entirely different rooms, and suddenly your bathroom lights are turning on because somebody rolled over in bed. So when SONOFF released this new sensor, the SONOFF SenseGuard Presence Core 24G, God that's a mouthful, I was a bit skeptical, because on paper it's actually more sensitive. It uses a 24 GHz mmWave radar instead of the lower frequency from the previous model, which should theoretically make the false triggering even worse. But surprisingly, this might actually be the best presence sensor I've tested for small rooms. So let's find out why. Hi, I'm James, and I've been building out my smart home for years, with products from just about every manufacturer out there, figuring out what works and what doesn't. Now, if you watch my ensuite build video, you'll know that I originally used the ThirdReality R1 motion sensor in here. And honestly, it was a bit of a compromise. The problem was again sensitivity. If you were standing up and moving around, it worked absolutely fine. But if you so much as sat on the toilet for too long, the lights would go off on you. Which is not exactly the premium smart home experience that we're aiming for. But even if I adjusted the sensitivity and placement, it would start detecting people walking outside of the bathroom, and often both at once. So our new little bathroom turned out to be a bit of a torture test for presence sensors. It's a tiny space with thin walls, and the nearby bedroom and hallway with lots of false trigger opportunities, but also it needed enough sensitivity for someone sat still for a while. And it turns out that this new sensor from SONOFF solves these problems in a very clever way. So compared to the previous sensor, there are a few major upgrades here. First, it's the radar itself. This new model uses the 24 GHz mmWave radar, as I mentioned before, and yeah, it's extremely sensitive. It can detect micro movements like breathing and even minute bodily motions. But the real improvement isn't actually in the radar itself. It's the control that SONOFF finally gives you over where and how it detects people. This thing now lets you split the detection area into 7 separate distance zones. And that completely changes how usable it is. Because instead of just saying be more or less sensitive to motion, you can literally decide only detect movement within this specific distance zone of the sensor. I just want to demo the fact that this light here, probably better off in this view, is currently linked up via an automation, but it will not trigger unless I go within 1 meter of the sensor right now. I literally had to get to there before it would actually trigger the light. In my setup, I've configured it to only detect within roughly 2 meters of the sensor. So now it still detects me sitting in the bathroom, it keeps the lights on properly, but it completely ignores movement from the bedroom nearby. And in all honesty, that is exactly what the previous sensor desperately needed. If you tried the older model and gave up because it was constantly false triggering, then this is probably the upgrade that you have been waiting for. And on top of the distance, SONOFF has also added proper sensitivity adjustment this time as well. So instead of just the one generic detection profile, you can fine-tune it depending on the room. And this is why this sensor works so well in this little bathroom. I could crank up the sensitivity high enough to reliably detect someone sitting relatively still without needing the detection range to extend beyond the bathroom. That combination is what makes this sensor genuinely useful in difficult spaces like ours. Because most presence sensors are either not sensitive enough in certain situations or way too trigger happy and end up triggering on interference. This is one of the first ones that I've used where I felt like I actually had enough control to tune it properly for a small room like this. And then they've also added probably the most interesting feature, detection calibration, which is basically a self-learning mode. The sensor monitors the environment and learns recurring interference patterns from things like fans, pipes, appliances, and even air movement. And then it filters those out automatically. And that's a really smart addition for mmWave sensors because false positives have always been the Achilles heel of this technology. And this isn't a new idea, but it's something that's only been available on the much more expensive options until now. And this is especially powerful in smaller rooms like this where reflections are more prevalent. So pairing high sensitivity with better filtering was exactly the right direction for SONOFF to go on this device. So bravo SONOFF. Now there is one downside compared to the ThirdReality sensor in this particular case, and that is power. This sensor uses a USB-C power source instead of batteries, which I typically prefer, and makes sense for mmWave sensors because they consume more power continuously. But in a tiny retrofit like this, it did mean I had to get slightly creative. So I basically ended up running a USB cable around the door frame to power the sensor from outside the bathroom. Not the cleanest install, but put it this way, that ugly cable is not keeping me up at night, but the light false triggering was. Now for Home Assistant users, this sensor is pretty flexible as well. Like all of SONOFF's Zigbee sensors, it supports Zigbee 3.0, works fine with ZHA and Zigbee to MQTT, and SONOFF also lets you configure some of the advanced features directly over Bluetooth through the eWe Link app if your platform doesn't expose all the settings directly. And that's actually quite a nice touch because a lot of sensors lock advanced configuration behind their own ecosystem entirely, so bravo again to SONOFF for that one. It can also be wall or ceiling mounted very easily using the supplied magnetic base, which you can stick or screw to just about any surface. So overall, I think SONOFF have absolutely smashed this out the park, and they've learned all of the right lessons on this sensor from the original SNZB-06P. Because the old sensor had great hardware and it was held back by its limited control options. This new model finally gives you those tools to tame the sensitivity instead of fighting against it. And for difficult spaces like bathrooms and hallways and small bedrooms or my tiny study like this, that makes quite a big difference. For me, this is now working noticeably better than both the ThirdReality sensor it replaced and the standard SNZB-06Ps, which I have in all of the rooms up here. The lights stay on reliably when the room is occupied, but I'm no longer getting constant random triggers from movement outside of the bathroom, which is exactly what you want. So if you previously wrote off the mmWave presence sensors, especially from SONOFF, because they felt unreliable or a bit too sensitive, then this might be the sensor that changes your mind. If you want to see the original video for this en-suite build, by the way, I'll link that up on the screen shortly. And if you found a presence sensor that works even better than this one in small rooms, do please let me know down in the comments or on my Discord, because this category is evolving so quickly that I'm interested to see if you guys have tried something that you think might be even better. As usual, the link will be down in the description if you want to buy your own, and it will earn a small commission for me at no cost to you. So thank you for supporting the channel. Anyway, thank you as always for watching, and as always remember, home is where the smart is.